Thank you, Lou. So, Mark, I paid attention during your talk about Elmira, so I'd like a little bit of feedback when I'm done with this. Let me know how we did or are doing. So, I put together a little synopsis of the history here. The histories of towns and villages are developed slowly, and they feed upon success and desires. Very few municipalities have had their downtown economic vitality created or shut down overnight. It's usually a slow process brought forth by subtle philosophic alterations and thought processes, sometimes even go unnoticed. But on the demise side, not often it's too late before you realize what's going on. Maybrook, in this case, is an outlier. On May 8th, 1974, the economic engine that was Maybrook came to a screeching halt. That was the date of the Poughkeepsie Railroad Bridge fire. That bridge is today known, as Mark pointed out, the walkway over the Hudson, and a very successful part of downtown Poughkeepsie. The bridge was the sole route for all freight between the East Coast and New England across the Hudson River. 100% of that rail traffic either emanated in or was serviced in the village of Maybrook. Maybrook had 43 miles of rail track. Now it has 1. Maybrook died in one catastrophic event. That was 44 years ago. Since this fire, Maybrook has floundered at best economically. Main Street became populated with ever fewer commercial venues and ever more neglected apartments. Today, it qualifies quite substantially as poverty. The role of economic development, as was explained to me at the time, was quite simple: bring business and vitality back to the village. Sounds easy enough. I had just retired from Stewart Air National Guard Base, and this was not my area of expertise. The first thing that had to be done was to better understand that role. So happened I had a recent conversation with a friend of mine who was an insurance agent, insurance broker. He was complaining to me about the trouble that he was having trying to get a small project that he had in a neighboring village up in Ulster County off the ground. I called him, told him about my new position, and asked him for some advice. His story was confusing, compelling, and enlightening. His financing was canceled because zoning had changed. The wetlands on the property had grown. He had to accomplish secret and EIS twice after submitting new site plans. He was forced to reduce the overall number of units that he was building, but no reduction in his infrastructure. That made his financing untenable. This was 20 years that he owned this property. Today, he has moved out of the area. The vacant property still exists as it was 20 years ago. This was not the result that I envisioned for the village of Maybrook, and I assumed that the village board was supporting what I was going to be trying to do. Just to be safe, I asked. A memory from my planning board days pertained to an applicant who wanted to build 3 homes. The process took him over 2 years, multiple trips back to the planning board, zoning board, village board. A lot of that had to do with the sewer moratorium that we had in place. Nevertheless, he did make various trips to boards. Having been just assigned to this new role, I got a call from his real estate broker asking, was there anything I could do to speed this process along? I asked around, and I found that I was outside my area of concern. It was suggested that I let the process work itself out and don't get involved with other people's issues. Not exactly what I thought I signed up for. I asked again for clarification to the position and confirmed that we did indeed want business to come back into the village of Maybrook. So what to do? Educate. I sat with real estate brokers, developers, builders, business owners, bankers, planners, engineers, and attorneys. I attended placemaking events, conferences, seminars, Orange County partnership presentations, NICOM events, and so on. I visited various towns and villages, cities that were the focus of previous placemaking events. And I brought these ideas back to the village mayor and to the board. From the volumes of notes that I made, vague suggestions as to how I thought we could proceed to get Maybrook back on a map. The first thing we had to do is accept the reality that our past was not going to be our future. We assessed the situation, performed a SWOT analysis, and found that we have a high amount of undercapitalized strengths. Maybrook borders on 6,700 acres of Stewart State Forest land. All of this right in here, 6,700 acres. A cooperative land used by hunters, bicyclists, hikers, hunting dog trainers, winter snowmobiling, snowshoe hiking, cross-country skiing. It is interesting to point out that would one person circumnavigate the entire property, one will find but a single place to eat or drink. And that's 6,700 acre playground. The old rail yard that was in excess of 750 acres, nearly the size of the village of Maybrook, is still privately held today, and it's used only by trespassing motorcycles and four-wheelers. This property exists between the active rail line and the state forest along the entire eastern border of the village. That is a zoned industrial site. It is also interesting to point out that the effort to curtail access by motorcycles and these four-wheelers also prevented any access to the 6,700 acres to village residents. Maybrook also sits in the shadow of the Neelytown Road industrial development to the west, right along this corridor, and also Bracken Road development up here on the east, on the north side. Maybrook is the closest downtown to both of these sites. That's approximately 9 million square feet of existing industrial and warehouse space. Our weaknesses were found to be equally diverse. Zoning, pointed out by developers, was extremely restrictive. Property use restrictions, pointed out by our realtors, permitted a single use on a property, not in a building, but on a property in our downtown B2 district. No mixed use anywhere was permitted in the entire B2 district, and the process was prolonged by legal requirements that seemed to be endless and just multiple trips to planning boards because of consultants' reviews. Any viable return on any investment was impossible. Area rents could never cover the cost of any development. But we kept open minds and we sought to convert these weaknesses to opportunities and take advantage of our strengths. We sought partnerships with like-minded and developed executable, workable goals. The old 750-acre rail yard, and here again, borders the entire 2-mile eastern border of the village. We spoke with the property owners on 3 separate occasions before we were able to convince them that the village was wholly behind their developing that property, explaining our desire to create a tax base. They are currently in the engineering phase of this development. Wetlands have been delineated, surveys are complete, secret completion is anticipated by September, and the expectation is they will start construction of a 2-mile-long access road next spring. My understanding, Ross, if you're here in the room, they are in the process of getting their DEC approvals. We discussed the rail crossing with the owner of the active rail line for access to and from this new corporate park, and for the corporate park to be served by rail. Once again, Maybrook will receive a tax base. The corporate park developers will receive the support of the village for their investment, and the rail owners potentially multiple new clients. Well, safety was of paramount concern to the rail owners. Having a potential high volume of pedestrians crossing an active rail line was less than ideal for their perspective. To curtail pedestrian traffic, we're planning to refurbish and upgrade an old, closed, and no longer used, built by the railroad, pedestrian tunnel that goes underneath that rail line. Can we go to map 2, please, if somebody can? Thank you. That tunnel would be right in this area, right here. We are now in agreement with the railroad owners in principle to have a grade crossing feeding directly into our new designated downtown from this new corporate park, allowing fire and emergency service access directly into the Stewart State Forest lands. Can we go to map 3, please? Thank you. This is our downtown. This would be the access tunnel. This is the new road going in. Main Street would be extended. This is a new road that we're building. And this is our DRI, Downtown Revitalization Initiative. And yes, we are in competition with Port Jervis for the DRI. So. We showed the level of commitment by increasing the building coverage of this industrial park from 30% to 50% for the lands inside the village. For this, we made 2 demands to these property owners: that an access rail crossing could only be at the foot of Main Street, which they agreed to, and from which we would have the right to build a 2-mile-long access hiking and bicycling path accessing the entire Stewart State Forest. And for the users of the Stewart State Forest to access our downtown to enjoy dining, drinking, and what have you. We discussed the to encourage growth and interest in creating a brand new downtown. The village is rebranding itself as the outdoor recreation destination for Orange County. Sorry, Port Jervis. To attract business. We are planning to purchase an underutilized property to build a new performing arts park right in here with an amphitheater. Parking for bicyclists and hikers will be directly next to the pedestrian tunnel, right along in this area, and the Performing Arts Park. To spark downtown revitalization, we created a brand new district called the Traditional Downtown Design District. This TDD now allows multi-use buildings up to 4 stories, reduced and shared parking incentives. It's based on the principles of form-based zoning, and it follows all of the recommendations of the Orange County Greenway and meets all of the village comprehensive plan requirements. We saved an estimated 90% of a typical $200,000 price tag by doing most of the footwork in-house. We purchased property right up in here, raised a building that was on it, cleaned 5 unknown gasoline-filled storage tanks from the ground for a new 50-car municipal parking lot smack in the middle of our TDD. We also did one more thing. To entice developers to come into a blighted area and take a hard look at the village of Maybrook, we completed SECRA for the entire TDD. We completed and executed a scoping document. We completed an EIS with a Type 2 listing for the entire TDD. Maybrook today is more shovel-ready than any other village in this county. We plan to have developed, the plan we have developed and executing epitomizes the state's mantra of live, work, play. Any of the new 9 buildings that are going to be built along this proposed new road can be accessed by bicycle or walking, no traffic lights. The plan we developed and are executing, we adopted the new zoning plan on 28 February 2018. I believe that's 4 months ago. And today we have 4 private developers who have either closed on or are in the process of securing lands inside this TDD. These are the 4 sites that we have. There are 2 sites right in here. One is a microbrewery. We have a performing arts school that's interested in coming in. We have a private developer that's looking to buy the entire block here, and we have another that is up in this area. They're planned for multi-use, multi-story, multi-use buildings, a cafe, delicatessen apartments above on one side, and mixed use on the other 2. Many of the ideas used to develop and execute this plan came from the meeting that you are sitting in today. Let me point out that the only tangible thing that I brought with me into this position from my military service was this: don't tell me what I can't do. Tell me how I can get it done. The one thing that you need to have are the right consultants. You have to recognize this, and you have to be not afraid to make the necessary changes in order to execute a plan. Maybrook has had many changes. I was invited to my first placemaking event several years ago by our newly hired consultants, Stu Turner and Max Stack, of, at the time, the Turner Miller Group. They have since merged with and become part of the Nelson, Pope, and Voorhees powerhouse. And when asked to come speak today, I was both honored and humbled that we have come this far. This is where the spark for Maybrook's about face has come from, this room. Maybrook's future initially began, and I thank both of you very much for the invitation to be here today. Thank you. It's been 5 years since I first sat in a placemaking event. It's been one hell of a ride. Thank you.